Okay, this is because we're okay. Let me take it first. Where we're gonna begin. Okay, so I'll begin offering some prayers. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chaksurmilitan Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhupayevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Sarasati Devi Kauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So yesterday we spoke about mixed devotional service, and today we're going to go on and speak about pure devotional service. Yesterday we brought out the different impurities and imperfections which are there in the path of mixed devotion, and how they can only result in material benefit. You cannot get pure love of God unless you have pure loving devotion. And to have pure loving devotion, you must have pure faith. So faith is a very important part of loving devotional service. So Rupa Goswami has given us this very perfect definition of pure devotional service. I'm sure you're all familiar with this verse. Anyway, Anya Bilasita Shunyam Gyana Karma Dhyanavritam Anukoyena Krishna Nushilanam Bhaktir Uttamam. Bhakti Uttamam, Bhaktir Uttamam, the highest devotion. Srila Rupa Goswami coins this phrase, this term. It was not known before Rupa Goswami. He was the one who actually brought it into people's thoughts, that there is such a thing as Bhakti Uttama, the highest devotion. And he's defining it for us in a very perfect manner here in this definition. Okay, mentioned also in Chaitanya Charitamrita as well as in Nectar of Devotion. When first class devotional service develops, one must be devoid of all material desires, knowledge obtained by monistic philosophy and purification. Devotee must constantly serve Krishna favorably as Krishna desires. So we see there are different characteristics. We have the essential characteristics and the marginal characteristics, or the Swarupa and the Tatastha Lakshanas. The definition can be analyzed in this way, appreciating the different characteristics which are essential and which are also helpful or supportive to the essential characteristics. The principal statement, and then we'll see the further qualities which help to support these principal statements. Swarupa Lakshana, Anukuyena, Krishna, Anushilanam, and then Tatastha Anyabilasita sunyam and jnana karma janavritam. We should mention this particular sloka from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. This is the Paribhashya Sutra of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. It is the sloka or the statement on which all the teachings of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu are based. All the writings of Rupa Goswami are actually based around this one sloka, the Paribhashya Sutra. So the primary foundation and the complete teaching of the philosophy is there within that one sloka. We're going to examine these different qualities. Anuko yena. What is actually favorable to pure devotion? We said, Anukuyena Krishna Nushilarama, Anyabilasita Sunyam Jnana Karma Janavritam. So the first line is describing the secondary characteristics. Anukuyena Krishna Nushilanam Bhaktir Uttamam. The second two lines describing the Swarupa Lakshana, the principal characteristics. So first of all, the activities of devotional service should be pleasing to Krishna, must be pleasing to Krishna. And then performed with the intention to please Krishna. Not only must it be pleasing to Krishna, but the intention must also be there to please Krishna. The example is given sometimes when Krishna was in the arena at Mathura fighting the wrestlers. Chanura was pounding on the chest of Krishna. And Chanura, with his rock-like body, mountain-like form, appearing in front of Lord Krishna, and he's pounding on the chest of Krishna. And Krishna is pleased, Krishna is appreciating that this man is such a hero, he's so brave, he's so bold. So, is it Chanura is also doing devotional service? Of course not. Chanura's mood was to kill Krishna. Although Krishna took pleasure in it, it was not Chanura's intention to be pleasing to Krishna. So it's important that we qualify the service. The intention must be there to actually please Krishna. And at the other extreme, you have the example of Mother Yashoda and how Lord Krishna had stolen the butter and he'd broken the butter pot. He picked up a stone and broken the pot of butter, and he'd gone off and left butter around the place and feeding it to monkeys. Lord Krishna was angry at his mother because his mother wasn't feeding him her breast milk, and she went off to take care of the milk on the stove. So Lord Krishna in his anger had done all this. So Mother Yashoda comes to get Krishna, and of course Mother Yashoda, she's still, although Krishna's angry, Mother Yashoda's, she just wants to love Krishna. Her intention is only to please Krishna. She didn't mean to make Krishna angry. It was just a spontaneous reaction which got her to put Krishna down and go and take care of the milk. But her intention is always there to please Krishna. So we have to be very careful about understanding what is actually favorable to Krishna and what is not. Oh.
I think you're on mute, Maharaj. I think you have to unmute yourself, Maharaj.
I think hosts can unmute other participants remotely.
Jagannath Prabhu, can you unmute Maharaj? Is it possible for you?
Maharaj can unmute himself. Maharaj, you go to the back of the screen. There's a mute, unmute. Just click on the mute, unmute button. It will be unmuted.
Somebody has a phone number of his. Can you call him and tell him? Yes. Got unmuted.
Maharaj, are you able to hear us?
Jagannath Prabhu, you can give a phone call. You just
Yeah,
call
I'm
him.
just trying to do that.
Phone.
Yes.
Yeah, that is best.
I just spoke to Maharaj, and Maharaj is having a technical problem, and he's switching the computer. That's the reason it's taking a little while. So please bear with us. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay, so I just had to change this over here. I'm working on this computer. I'm not sure if I've got the PowerPoint in here. But just check. Let's see.
Maharaj, can you get the laptop little down? We cannot see your face completely. Thank you,
Okay.
Maharaj.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I have made you the co-host again, so you can share the PPT.
Yeah, if I have it on here. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not able to come up with the PowerPoint. We'll just have to lecture without the PowerPoint. Okay, so we were speaking anyway about nature of devotional service, the different characteristics, the primary characteristics. So first-class devotee, first-class devotion is to be fully engaged in Krishna consciousness, right? Serving Lord Krishna favorably. That is a very important qualification for pure devotional service. Being fully engaged in Krishna's service. And we spoke a little bit about the cultivation. That this word cultivation, Prabhupada uses it to describe the mood of the devotee engaging in devotional service. There are different aspects to this, two aspects particularly, the aspect of the activity itself and then the mood with which the activity is done. One may have the right mood, but the activity may not be quite suiting. Other times they may have a very, very important activity, but he's not really in the mood. You know, you get people, they go out on Sankirtan. The Sankirtan, of course, is it's the highest activity. That's the supreme activity, but not everybody's in that mood. They don't have that, you know, they don't feel so comfortable there. And other times people, it's the other way around. People are, they're given the activity, they're given some activity which is not really in proportion to their mood. They may have a very good mood to do service, but somehow the activity which they're given does not allow them to fully utilize their potential. So cultivation, the cultivation of Krishna consciousness, being fully engaged, very important for us. Prabhupada states, without activity, consciousness alone is not going to help us. Some people may think like that simply being conscious is enough. Just be conscious. Just sit, be conscious. Don't need to do anything. No, I'm sitting, I'm thinking of Krishna. Is that pure devotion? Well, certainly Prabhupada doesn't think like that. I remember what sometimes Prabhupada would say to a devotee, do something useful. The devotee would just be standing around, what happened was one morning in Vrindavan, you know, Prabhupada was quite upset about some things. He wasn't too happy with the management and that. One devotee was standing there, I think it was Vishal, a devotee called Vishal. I don't know if you know him. He's a very old Prabhupada disciple. Anyway, Prabhupada came walking by and Vishal goes, Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. And Prabhupada just looked at him and said, do something useful. So just simply being conscious is not enough. There's got to be some activity. This is the important point. So activities in Krishna consciousness can be positive or negative. How are you going to do? What kind of activities are you going to do? The activities can be pavriti or nivriti. We know surrender to Krishna, accepting what is favorable for Krishna and rejecting what is unfavorable. So pavriti is performed. There's with the body and then with the mind and with words. Generally like that, these different faculties, body, mind, and words. Devotee wants to use body, mind, and words all in the service of Krishna. So first 10 items of activities of devotional service described in Nectar of Devotion. Prabhupada lists all 64 items concerning devotional service. The first 10 are all in relation to activities which are favorable to Krishna consciousness. We mentioned, first 5 are in relation to the Guru. right? Taking shelter of a spiritual master, serving him with submission, taking initiation from him, taking instruction, this kind of thing. So these are all favorable to Krishna consciousness. And then there are activities which are unfavorable to Krishna consciousness. And those are the next 10 items. The first 10 are all favorable, things we should do. And then the next ones, the next 10 are all unfavorable. Things like giving up the association of non-devotees, and then namaparad, seva aparad, these kind of things. These are all unfavorable to Krishna's service. We want to be very conscious of this. What is actually favorable and what's unfavorable? Devotional service, we point out bhakti itself, devotional service is Krishna's internal potency. It's his Swarup Sakti. And our activities, although we're using our material bodies, our activities are actually spiritualized by the grace of Krishna and the spiritual master. When we perform the activities with the right attitude, with the right mood of surrender to Krishna, then these activities are fully spiritualized. We may wonder, how is it possible? Our senses are material, our bodies material, we're conditioned souls. How is it possible that we could be engaged in spiritual activities? So this is possible by the grace of the Swarup Shakti, through the spiritual potency of Lord Krishna, that he purifies the activities. So these activities are meant to be giving pleasure to Krishna. And at the same time, as we said, there has to be also the intention to please Krishna. Not that we just simply, not that we just simply do the activity, but there has to be the actual mood to want to please Krishna. So we give the example about Chanura, that he was, on one extreme, Chanura, his mood in serving Krishna, and Mother Yashoda on the other extreme in her service to Krishna. Mother Yashoda, of course, she really wants to please Krishna, but Krishna's angry. But Krishna's anger, this was because she was not giving all of her love, which Krishna wanted to get from her. So we have the mood of being fully engaged. It's important. And then the mood of also doing everything for Krishna. And the third characteristic, that Krishna is the actual enjoyer, the sole enjoyer of all of our activities, of all of our devotion. And this is maybe the most important, that mood that we want to actually give pleasure to Krishna. And pleasing Krishna means also pleasing his different expansions, his energies. We've got we have some aspects of Krishna, however, which don't get that same devotion. We know that the Lord has his different features. Learned transcendentalists call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So the Lord is manifest as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. And there's no difference between Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. It's all the Supreme Lord. But we want to understand that the mood of devotion is not offered to the Brahman or the Paramatma. The Brahman is the impersonal aspect of the Lord. There's no personality there. It's the Chit feature, or rather it's the Sat feature of the Lord. The eternal potency of the Lord is there. But there's no personality there. So there's no question of having a devotional relationship with the Brahman. And then also with the Paramatma, although the Paramatma is personal, but still the Paramatma is not going to give us the experience of the bliss. The Anand comes only in relationship to the Bhagavan feature. Paramatma is the localized expansion of the Lord, and Paramatma gives us realization of that Chit potency of the Lord, Sat and Chit, eternal and knowledge, but there's no bliss. There's no bliss there in the realization of the Paramatma or serving the Paramatma. You're not going to get bliss from it. And then we go on to understand also the Paramatma's feature is also limited to the material world. Paramatma is not going to go with us to the spiritual world. Paramatma's service is here in this material realm. We want to actually get out of the material world. So we want to cultivate our relationship with Krishna, not with the Brahman and not with the Paramatma, but directly with Krishna. Someone was saying they wanted to worship Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. So I said, well, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu is going to be different from Krishna. You're not going to get the same kind of rasa worshipping Vishnu as you get from Krishna. There are special features in the worship of Krishna. So we have to appreciate these points. We want to develop our relationship with Krishna. And in order to develop this relationship with Krishna, of course, we have to have proper sadhana. We have to be properly engaged in Krishna's service. And that will give us the protection from the material energy. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spoke his teachings to the Goswamis, and he asked the Goswamis then to write books. And Rupa Goswami, of course, he wrote his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and Upadesha Amrita, as well as his other books, his drama like Lalita Madhava, Vidagdha Madhava. But Rupa Goswami is particularly known for his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, very important book for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, because he's describing fully the science of Bhakti Yoga. So he's describing to us about this, we said Uttama Bhakti. Rupa Goswami, just like Prabhupada coined the phrase Krishna consciousness, Rupa Goswami coined this phrase Uttama Bhakti. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives the example, he says, just like if you say to someone, here is some pure water. You know, when we're in India, you want to be very careful about what you drink. So somebody gives you a glass of water, you will ask them, is this pure water? Is this good water? Is this drinking water or not? And so Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, this is pure water. So in the same way, when we talk about devotion, Rupa Goswami is describing Uttama Bhakti. This is not mixed devotion. This is pure devotion, right? This is the difference. So we said this is the Paribhasa Sutra. You could say the mission statement of Krishna consciousness. So the primary characteristics, first-class devotion to Krishna. First-class devotion is to be fully engaged in Krishna consciousness, serving the Lord favorably. Fully engaged in Krishna consciousness and doing service favorably. So these are the criterions for the primary characteristic. So the full engagement we spoke about, we want to be using body, mind, and words in the service of Krishna. The mood should be right. The activity also must be favorable. And it has to be for Krishna's enjoyment. Krishna and Krishna's expansions, Krishna's energies. These are all aspects of Krishna. We want to cultivate Krishna consciousness because our desire is to develop Krishna consciousness as taught by the Goswamis, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They're teaching us Braja Bhakti, not just simply Vaikuntha Bhakti, but Braja Bhakti. So we want to somehow be worthy of this highest thing, the highest level of Krishna consciousness. So primary characteristics are not enough just simply for pure devotion. These three things are not enough for pure devotion. The secondary characteristics are also necessary. They help to support the primary characteristics. Secondary characteristics, meaning that we should be free from material desire, meaning desires for sense gratification or even for liberation. Pure devotion means no material motive. Having desires, right? This is described, anya bilasita shunyam, desiring only to please Krishna. So this is the definition Rupa Goswami has given. He's not just simply given anyabilasa sunyam, but anyabilasita sunyam. He put the ta on the end just to make it perfect, to give the perfect definition. Because there are certain desires which we may also have to have. Desires for our own protection, to save our own life. We may be in a life-threatening situation, and therefore we may have to desire certain things which we have to desire sometimes to eat, we have to desire to live. So that's also allowed in pure devotional service. That we want to use our body in Krishna's service, and we may have to actually desire our own self-preservation. But that can also be in the mood of pure devotion. However, the point is made, it's not that every day that we should desire like that. To have desires every day that, oh, Krishna save me, it becomes every day and then becomes every hour. And you have so many, we're always asking Krishna, do this, oh, Krishna, that, oh, Krishna. Yeah. No, the mood should be to give service to Krishna rather than to take from Krishna. We don't want to take service from Krishna, but we may sometimes need to take service from Krishna. We may need Krishna's mercy. Just like just now, some of our devotee God brothers are in very precarious situations with their material bodies. We have Kadambakanna Maharaj, he's got the COVID disease, so that's not very pleasant. And then Bhakti Madhurya Govinda Maharaj, he's in a very precarious situation there. He had a big operation in Delhi, and it's left him paralyzed. He can't move his arms or legs. So very, very, very critical situation. So in that kind of situation, then certainly we're asking all the devotees, pray to Krishna, because Krishna, by prayer, the power of prayer, can save devotees even from these life-threatening situations. So in Krishna consciousness, we're very much desirous to want to serve Krishna. And at the same time, Rupa Goswami understands that sometimes we may have to desire like this, that we may have to desire for our own self-preservation. But at the same time, we should be cautious that this doesn't mean that we can simply desire for ourselves to have luxuries. That would be very much against the mood of pure devotion, to want to have luxuries, very special facilities. Rather, we should follow the mood of the Goswamis, and we can understand their mood from the Goswami Astikam. I remember when Satsvarupa Maharaj and Hridayananda Maharaj took sannyas, they took sannyas, and Prabhupada gave them the name Goswami. No, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he'd also had the name Goswami earlier, but when Satsvarupa and Hridayananda Maharaj took sannyas, then they met with Srila Prabhupada, and they asked him about this name, Goswami, and he told them, you can understand Goswami by studying the Goswami Astikam. If you study the prayer by Srinivas Acharya, Goswami Astikam, then you will know what is a Goswami. So, in the Goswami Astikam, it describes how the Goswamis, they gave up all association with the aristocracy, and they accepted loincloths. They were living very simply, very austerely. They were always meek and humble, and they were absorbed in the mood of gopis, chanting the holy name of Krishna. So, in this way, we should understand what should be the mood of the genuine devotee, the renounced personality, that we're not attached to our own comfort. We're not attached to our own material facilities. We can live very simply. We know Srila Prabhupada living in Radha Damodar had a very simple room. When you've all probably been there to Radha Damodar and seen Prabhupada's room there. And Prabhupada would work there, and he wrote his first canto, Srimad Bhagavatam there. And he planned how to begin the Krishna consciousness movement there. And he took great inspiration from Srila Rupa Goswami just by residing there at Radha Damodar. But the room itself is very, very basic and simple. When Prabhupada went to America and began preaching there in America, he would tell the devotees, I have my headquarters in Radha Damodar in Vrindavan. So the devotees heard Prabhupada speak, oh, Swamiji has his headquarters there. They thought it must be, something really big and wonderful. And when they actually came to Vrindavan and then they saw, a very humble room, but Prabhupada resided there and he did a lot of the foundational work for the Krishna consciousness movement there. So this is the mood of the Goswamis. This is the mood of actual renunciation. So desire, we have to be also very conscious about desire. Anya vilasita shunyam. We don't want any desires just for our own sense gratification. Sometimes devotees are criticized that we demand too much, we want too much facilities. We must be willing to accept whatever facilities are given to us by the grace of Krishna. I joined the Krishna consciousness movement in the 1970s, and 1971 actually in London, and I was later on in New York in 1973. I'd gone to America there, and I was in Brooklyn Temple, the old 439 Henry Street Temple in Brooklyn. And we had a wonderful ashram there. We had over 100 brahmacharis staying there. Many wonderful devotees joined at that time. I remember people like Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu, and Dravida Prabhu, Jai Sachinandan Prabhu, Agnidev Prabhu. There were many different people all came and joined. And there was also people like Romapada Swami there. Oh, he was a brahmachari, of course, at that time. But there were many wonderful devotees. But the temple was packed. We were living so simply. Yashomati Nandan Prabhu came through the temple. He was going to India at the time. He came through New York to stay for a day before he went to India. And he was amazed to see how we were living. We would just simply find some space on the floor. Everyone just lay down on the floor, just sleep there. And that everybody was happy. It was the most ecstatic temple. So material facilities are not really what we need for spreading Krishna consciousness. Although today we do see we have a bit more in the way of material facilities, much more material facilities than we did have initially. But still, we shouldn't be demanding if the facilities are not there. Devotee can tolerate. I was in London. Prabhupada, our temple in London was very small. It was the old Bury Place Center, number 7 Bury Place. And Keshava Prabhu, a senior devotee, came from California to help us build up the Sankirtan in England. And when he came there and he saw our facilities, he said, oh, Prabhupada can't stay here. He said, no, this is not good enough for Prabhupada. And he wrote to Prabhupada and told Prabhupada, he said, Prabhupada, next time you come to London, we're going to get you a room in the hotel. We don't think this room in the temple is good enough for you, Prabhupada. We want to get you a room in the hotel. But Prabhupada wrote back and said, I don't want to stay in the hotel. I want to stay in the temple. So that it was very meaningful to all the devotees that we were really all very enlightened and inspired by Prabhupada's response. Although the temple was very basic and limited, but Prabhupada was very clear. He didn't want to stay in a hotel. He was happy to stay with the devotees. And he knew space was limited. He knew there wasn't a lot of facility there, but he knew this is where the purity is. The devotion is there, the devotees are all there, and he wanted to be with the devotees. He wanted to inspire all of us and to give us his association. He didn't want to go and sit in a hotel with a whole bunch of non-devotees. So desires, we have to be very careful about controlling our desires. Any comments so far? Anybody has any comment or question?
Maharaj,
Yes?
please accept my humble obeisances. This is Pran Govinda Das. In your earlier session, in the beginning of your explanation on super soul, I remember I read in Harivamsa that okay, I'm going to say first in Bhagavad Gita 15.18, Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, he quoted the verse, Tavad esha samprasada asmat sarira samothaya, the super soul coming out of the body enters into the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. And in Harivamsa, it explains that when Vasudev Maharaj brought Mathura Krishna to Vrindavan Krishna's place, Mother Joshoda's house, and Mother Joshoda already had Jogomaya and origin Brajananandan Krishna, and these two Krishna merged together. So then in a commentary, Sanatan Goswami Pad in Dasami Tippani writes that when devotee established the relationship with Brajananandan Vrindavan Krishna, then his super soul also merged into Brajananandan Krishna. But then here, 15:18, it says that super soul comes out of the body, enters into the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. Is this applicable to non-devotees, or what is your take on it?
Well, super soul merging into the Brahma Jyoti, that is described there. Yeah, that's in the purport there in the Bhagavad Gita also. Is that where you quoted it from?
15:18.
15:18, right? Yeah, I've read that. Yeah, yeah, and that's taken from the purport of Baladeva Vidyabhusan. He describes it like that. That the super soul merges into the Brahma Jyoti when the soul is perfect and the soul is going back to the spiritual world. So the Paramatma can merge there into the Brahma Jyoti. What's going to happen? I understood that that's for the devotee. When the devotee goes back to Godhead, my understanding was like that. He's become perfect. So he's given up the super soul is no longer needed to guide him and to lead him or to direct him. So the super soul can enter into the Brahma Jyoti. But that Brahma Jyoti, where is that Brahma Jyoti? The Brahma Jyoti is everywhere. The effulgence of the Brahma Jyoti is there, the light of the sun. Everything is Brahman. So the Brahma Jyoti can be still in the material world. Paramatma is still going to be there in the material world. It's not Paramatma is going to go into the spiritual world. It's still there in the material world because his service is here. Now, for devotee, the pure devotee is going to go back to Godhead. So the Paramatma doesn't need to, he's waiting to wait for another soul to take birth. Some other souls will come, maybe some souls falling from the spiritual world, some other souls entering. Paramatma is needed. Paramatma is everywhere. Every atom, Paramatma is there. This whole material world is sustained. Krishna says, with a single fragment of myself, I pervade and support this entire creation. And Krishna is doing all that through the Paramatma. Right? This is his Paramatma feature. So Paramatma is clearly in the material world.
How do you explain that in the body we have thousands of atoms? I don't know. There is no number exactly mentioned. But anyway, but Paramatma is also in the atom, as you mentioned. But then Krishna stressing little more that I am in your heart. So heart is also including the body, not that heart is separated, but he's stretching it because he cares, he has an affection or some concept. He's specifically identifying that I am in your heart. Obviously, that must be something significant. So relationship, something building from that angle, or how should I see it?
Paramatma in the heart?
Yeah, the body, Krishna says, I'm in the atoms, enter into the atom. The body has a millions of or thousands of atoms. So why he is specifically saying, when he says, I'm in the atom, andantarastha paramanu chayantarastham, but still he says, sarvasya chaham hridhi sannivishta. This is my home, I reside there. There must be something specific, more intimate. Otherwise, heart is also part of the body. He already entered into the atom. Why he needs to say, I am also in your heart? It's like a redundant or...
Because the Paramatma in the heart is performing special function. The Paramatma in the heart is the overseer, the permitter, right? He's very much engaged. And he's accompanying that soul, he's accompanying that Jivatma. Since that Jivatma came into the material world, Paramatma has been with him in many different bodies, accompanying him and overseeing everything, remembering everything, knowing everything, all his past activities, his past births. There's that one Paramatma there, which knows everything. Other Paramatmas, they're just there. They're just, they're not active. They don't have that personal relationship with the jiva. They're just doing their function. They're just supporting the localized, all-pervading aspect of the Lord, supporting the entire creation through the atoms, through the material energy. But the particular Paramatma, which accompanies the jiva, that has a special function. So that's what Krishna is addressing.
Then can you, Maharaj, explain me about this 1862 Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says that surrender unto him utterly. Who is he? Who is speaking to about who? Here Krishna is speaking to Arjuna, but he is speaking about him. As per Prabhupada's translation, also it is, I was looking word to word meaning.
What's the Sanskrit?
Is it Tameva Saranam Gacha Sarva Bhavena Bharata Tat Prasadat Parama Santim Sthanam Prapashasi Shashyatam.
So sometimes Prabhupada will use him, sometimes Prabhupada will use third person, sometimes first person. Sometimes Krishna will speak about himself, and sometimes he will speak as others, referring to other. Sometimes Krishna will do like that. Sometimes he will speak on the level of Bhagavan, sometimes he will speak on the level of Paramatma, sometimes he will speak on Brahman. Just like he says, I am the taste and water. Does it mean Krishna is there in the water? He is through his energy. And so Krishna is speaking on different levels, not every time on the same level. So surrender unto him utterly. Surrender unto him. Who is that him? It can be the Supreme
Super
Lord.
soul or Krishna himself or super soul?
Well, Krishna, I think in that level he's speaking about, we heard about the 56 is the Brahman, right? And then 66, it comes to the surrender unto me, Krishna, and so it may be I'll have to look at the Bhagavad Gita to see exactly, but
In the translation, Prabhupada says, surrender unto him utterly. Krishna is telling to Arjuna. So that him, he could have said surrender unto me as 66, he directly said, but here he says surrender unto him. So that super soul has some relationship or it's just the super soul up to the Brahma Jyoti? Because my mind gets a little confused, so I was just trying to clarify.
super soul has some relationship. Well, definitely super soul has some relationship. Krishna does describe the different levels. He is bringing to different levels the knowledge. He said, knowledge perfect, more perfect, and then most perfect. He is describing knowledge of Brahman, then Paramatma, then Bhagavan. So there is some progression there in the teachings, and it's certainly there in that section of the 18th chapter, that Krishna is speaking in different levels, bringing up to higher levels from the Brahman, the Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma, and then coming up to the Sarvadharman Parigashna. So in between that, surrender unto him utterly. It could be the Lord in the heart, surrendering unto the super soul. I think it is actually, I think Krishna is speaking about surrendering unto the super soul, the Lord in the heart.
That means the relationship is there, eternal.
Well, when one is actually devotee, then the super soul is no longer Vishnu, but it becomes actually Krishna.
Okay, that's good.
Krishna comes in the heart of the devotee.
Okay, thank you, Maharaj.
May I share something, Maharaj?
Yes, please.
Pran Govinda Prabhu, you are referring to 1862, where Krishna says, Tameva Saranam Gacha Sarvabhavina Bharata. Before that, in 61, he is saying, Iswara Sarvabhutanam Riddhesara Junatishthati. But this conversation in chapter 18 is the following conversation from the previous chapters. So in 1861, when Krishna says, he is referring to super soul, like some other people, they come and, oh, Krishna is speaking directly about the super soul here. But he is saying in the heart. And in 15:15, he has already defined about who is residing in the super soul, in the heart. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto. Krishna, while speaking to Arjuna in 15th chapter, text number 15, he's clearly explaining that that's me who is residing in the heart of every living being. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto. Aham, me, means Krishna. And then here he is saying tam eva saranam gacha, by referring to that super soul who, that is me, I am residing there. So that is not different from Krishna for the devotees. Not that we are like Paramatmavadis and we are referring to the super soul and we are surrendering unto him. No, that super soul is Krishna who is residing in the heart. Devotee understands this. And he accepts Krishna as his shelter. So in that way, the conversation which Krishna and Arjuna had in 15th chapter, if you follow that, then it makes perfect sense that Krishna is referring to himself, not the super soul.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, so we spoke about desires in the heart, Of course, keeping desires in the heart, we have to understand that it's natural to have desires. So, what kind of desires can we have? What is the proper thing to desire? We should and sometimes devotees even question, are we allowed to desire to want to advance? So, what do you say? We'll ask some of the devotees. You can tell us what you think. Would you like to advance? You have the desire to advance?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, Maharaj, like we see the prayers by Narottam Das Thakur. He says, Kabe hobe se din amar. So this kind of prayers are a deep hankering for advancing. So we learn from the acharyas that this kind of desires are favorable. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
So Narottam Das Thakur is telling us to desire the association of devotees.
He says, when will that day come when I will reside in Vrindavan? When will that day come when my heart will be free from all kind of materialistic desires, offensive tendencies?
So that's an interesting point then. So maybe we should all desire to go and live in Vrindavan, is it? Is that what Narottam Das is encouraging? We should all go to Vrindavan and live there?
That is what he is saying. But the principle is, yes, like what I take is that it is favorable for the devotees to desire to advance in Krishna consciousness.
Living in Vrindavan.
That may, yeah, whereby they can reside in Vrindavan physically, or we can have the mood of Vrindavan.
Okay, yes, I think that's better. They have the mood of Vrindavan. But
Maharaj, can I say also from another angle to look at it, that Madhulila 7.99, it says, Katakan rahi prabhu tare alangia, bidai korila tare sakti sancharilla. Prabhupada made a very significant point in the purport that when we say Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu delivering thousands of people, or pure devotee traveling and delivering, what is that means, delivering? He said these two potency must enter from the heart of spiritual master to the heart of disciple. This cognizant potency and pleasure potency, these two potency must enter into the heart. So the disciple's only duty to completely dedicate in the mission of his guru, like Prabhupada in our case, that how to assist Prabhupada to fulfill his guru's mission. Then our mission is success. That should be our main primary, what I understand from that purport. That's so our main sole dedication should be to assist Srila Prabhupada in his movement to fulfill his Guru Maharaj's mission. Then automatically the entrance to our spiritual domain with our reviving our bhava, everything will be there in that, because those two potency are coming from guru to disciple.
okay, so we want to desire according to the mood of our spiritual master.
Yes.
Certainly very important. We want to think about the mission of the spiritual master. What was his desire? How to spread Krishna consciousness? That's Very relevant point. Okay, so there is room for desire, and certainly it's very nice if, as the other Prabhu said, if we desire to get free from material desires, we know within the heart there'll be we have a lot of material desires, maybe from the past, from previous life. We have material desires, things there in the heart. We have to understand these things, they're going to be there. We have to learn to live with them without bothering about them, not paying attention to them, and just going on to cultivate the real mood of devotion, the service to Krishna. Someone may think, oh, I still have material desires in my mind, therefore I can't really take up Krishna consciousness. But it doesn't have to be like that. Rather, we can understand that even though our heart is contaminated, even though we do have things in the heart, in the mind, we can dedicate ourselves fully to the service of Krishna and go on serving Krishna and do a lot of service for Krishna, even though there may be these things in the mind, these unwanted desires are there in the mind. But we still want to take up the opportunity to try to do some service for Krishna. So desiring to advance is good. We should want to desire to advance. We should want to try to go further in our Krishna consciousness.
One more point, Maharaj, you made very clearly. I appreciate that anukulyana definition you gave so nicely, because it is almost a paradox only when we stop wanting to enjoy chanting. Even every day we are chanting for myself. I'm chanting for myself. That idea, will the chanting produce unlimited nectar? So to understand this mystery, I ask myself, what is bhakti? So today's explanation, as you gave, very nice. What is devotional chanting? It means I should chant not for myself, but for Krishna. In that way, anukulyana. So I do it with a favorable mood, that of wanting to give pleasure to Krishna. In this way, kirtan leader, I must think, or japa chanter. I want myself to chant nicely for Krishna to relish my calling, as Prabhupada said, like a child calling for mother. So the activities for Krishna is not done mindlessly. It is consciously, mindfully. Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate that, Anukulyana.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yes. Okay, the mood of doing everything for Krishna, our chanting, our kirtan, our cooking, our preaching. Ultimately, we're all trying to do something for the pleasure of Krishna. So we spoke about desire, material desires, and these things, we're speaking about the secondary characteristics of devotion. We said, janma karma janavritam. There should be no desire for fruitive activities or for liberation. And fruitive activities, desiring sometimes, there may be the desire for material opulence. On the other hand, somebody may desire to renounce, the mood of renunciation. So what is our situation as devotees? How should we adjust in this mood of renunciation? We heard, as you said, Narottam Das, you quoted Narottam Das Thakur, talks about going to live in Vrindavan. So of course, living in Vrindavan is very nice. There was one devotee, it was a devotee called Subal Swami. So it was a long time ago, 1970s. He was preaching there, he'd come to India, and he came to Vrindavan. He said, oh, Prabhupada, I just love it here in Vrindavan. I just want to stay here and be Krishna conscious. And Prabhupada looked at him and said, your duty is to give Vrindavan to others. So Prabhupada made it very clear to him that You know, he wasn't just meant to just stay in Vrindavan, but he was meant to give Vrindavan to other people. So in that way, devotee has to appreciate Vrindavan. We want to give Vrindavan. We don't want to just take it for ourselves and just sit there in Vrindavan, find some nice quiet ashram, a little room there somewhere, and sit and chant. No, we have to think about other people. Prahlad Maharaj said he's not worried about himself. Wherever he goes, he can hear and chant. He's happy, but he's thinking with compassion for all these other people who are so much absorbed in the material world, who are trying to find their happiness in the family, in the home, in the sense gratification. They're working all their lives in the factories. They're so unfortunate. One devotee was telling me, one of my godbrothers, he was with Srila Prabhupada. He picked up Srila Prabhupada from the airport in Sydney, Australia, and they were riding in the car coming to the temple. It was early morning. So he was looking out of the window of the car and he could see all the people going to work. And he was thinking, look at all these people, so fools, these fools, they're all going off to work in their factories and horrible places. And he was like smiling, thinking about their foolishness. And he looked at Prabhupada and he saw that Prabhupada was looking at them with tears in his eyes. And Prabhupada was thinking, they're so unfortunate. So that mood of compassion was manifest there in Srila Prabhupada. We also want to have that kind of compassion. So Rupa Goswami, he didn't particularly appreciate, he doesn't particularly encourage that one should just simply go off and sit down in a cave away from the world. But he encourages that one should become Krishna conscious, and you should try to also distribute that Krishna consciousness as well. So living in the forest or going to the mountains, this is for the pseudo-transcendentalist, the pseudo-renunciate. But for the devotee, the proper attitude is to remain in whatever situation he is in and become Krishna conscious. Not to just give up our situation, not to just go away from the world, but to remain in the world. And we see the example in the Bhagavad Gita about the lotus flower, which sits on the water, never touched by the water. So devotee should be like that, like the lotus flower. He's not in the material world. He may be in the material world, but he's not identifying with the material world. Prabhupada said he was sitting in New York. Prabhupada was talking. I was hearing the tape. He said, I may be here in New York, but he said, I'm always thinking of Vrindavan. I'm always thinking of Vrindavan. And so thinking of Vrindavan is not different from actually being there in Vrindavan, practically. So that can be the mood of the devotee. Cultivating our Krishna consciousness means, therefore, practical renunciation, right? Rupa Goswami gives us his definition of renunciation, that, well, anasaktasya vishayam yatatam upayanjata nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yukta vairagya uchate. What is actual renunciation? Is to utilize everything in the service of Krishna. And if we simply give things up, then that is false renunciation. So Rupa Goswami recommends yukta vairagya, not falgu vairagya, but giving up the world, that is false renunciation. Rupa Goswami also mentions that by doing devotion, then our heart is meant to become soft. We're meant to experience loving emotions, loving feelings, and compassion, and so on, for other living entities and for Krishna. But if we simply do false, artificial renunciation, we reject the world, go away from everything, go away from all the people, then it simply makes the heart harder. Like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's poem, Tumi Kishera Vaishnava, right? What kind of Vaishnava are you? Simply for your name and adoration and distinction, you sit and chant the holy name. But within the mind, you're simply thinking so many things, so many mundane thoughts, so many thoughts of sense gratification. So that kind of renunciation is not appreciated. The mood of the devotee must be the renunciation, it must be in relation to Krishna. It must be so that we can do more service for Krishna. Rupa Goswami makes the point, however, that we should not over-endeavor. Over-endeavoring also is, that can be a problem. Sometimes we see within our Krishna consciousness movement, devotees will take on very big projects. They're very ambitious to do something. And Prabhupada did push devotees like that. He would say, what is the good of you being American unless you can do something wonderful for Krishna? So that mood should be there, that you really want to do something wonderful for Krishna, but at the same time, you have to be practical. You have to know your limitations. We were going to get one building in London. We were in Sevenbury Place and it was really full. We were really packed up. We wanted to get one building. We looked at a church and Prabhupada wrote back, and we told Prabhupada about the church. Prabhupada wrote back, he said, yes, when you go hunting, hunt for a rhinoceros. Prabhupada knew it was going to be, a little bit far beyond us. So, but he told us it's good, think big. And I heard also Achyutananda, who used to be a Swami, he was talking his memories. He was describing how when he first came to Vrindavan, he was in India. He was one of the first devotees. He came with Jayapataka Swami to India in 1969, I think. And so they were in the Gaudiya Math, and then they stayed in Gaudiya Math for a while. Then Prabhupada came, and then they came to ISKCON. So Prabhupada was looking, and he wanted to get a place in Vrindavan. So Achyutananda described, he said I said to Prabhupada, why don't we just get a little place around here, around Lloyd Bazaar? Something like Radha Damodar. Radha Damodar temple is just a small place, And so I said, why don't we just get a place like that? Just make a little place. But Prabhupada looked at him and said, I cannot think small. I have to do something big. So this was Prabhupada's mood anyway. He liked it if we would do something big, do something nice for Krishna. But at the same time, don't over-endeavor. Over-endeavor means you sacrifice your own sadhana. There was one time we were building the temple in South India, in Hyderabad. Devotees were building. I wasn't there at the time, but one devotee was leading the construction, and he was a sannyasi, and he was overseeing everything. So the devotees, some other devotees, they came and they told Prabhupada, they said, Prabhupada, that devotee is in charge there. He doesn't chant any rounds. He said, I'm so busy trying to build this temple for Krishna, I don't have time to chant my rounds. So when Prabhupada heard, he said, then it's just a question of time before he will leave Krishna consciousness. And so doing something wonderful for Krishna is very nice, but you don't want to sacrifice your own Krishna consciousness. That is very important. We have to save ourselves. And sometimes, sometimes it's difficult. We get caught up in some big preaching program. You're organizing so many things. Sometimes you have to be very careful not to get carried away and get too much involved with these big projects that we give up our own Krishna consciousness. If we don't have time to read and chant, we don't have time to associate with the devotees, then it's really dangerous. It's really not what you want. Any thoughts on this from the respected devotees?
Maharaj, I have a question. That you have demonstrated very nicely how the compassion, Prabhupada had a tears, narrated nice stories. So as Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that when bhakti arises in the heart, in the commentary of Shikshastakam, he mentioned that the four things naturally manifest as a byproduct. But then we also yesterday discussed about Sangha Siddha Bhakti, where looks like so my question is, should we endeavor separate quality to assist us to fulfill the Guru's desire to do bhakti, pure bhakti, or we should just do the pure bhakti that will be automatically produced, or we should do both?
Should do both.
Okay. Can you explain a little more?
Yes, we have to serve Krishna and we have to also keep our own Krishna consciousness. You have to do bhakti. If you don't do proper bhakti, then whatever you do, it's not going to have any real fruit. If you sacrifice your own Krishna consciousness, then that's a disaster. So you have to be very cautious about this. Now, I know a lot of older devotees, they were very big devotees in Prabhupada's time. They took on a lot of responsibility. They were young men and they were in the renounced order of life and they were leaders. They were doing a lot of kirtan and they were giving a lot of classes, leading a lot of men. But they couldn't keep it up. They couldn't maintain it. What was wrong? One reason was due to offenses, problems with dealing with other devotees. There were problems, there were issues, relationships with other devotees, and then also material desires. They did have material desires, and they were not able to curb them. They were not able to absorb themselves fully in sadhana. So sometimes at some points, you have to be able to take a break. You just have to go and find a place to sit down and hear and chant. Cannot just keep working on some big, but at the same time, we do have to work. We do have to do as much as we can, use our energy for Krishna. But we have to have some balance. Just like devotees come to Mayapur every year, the idea was Prabhupada, they'd come to Mayapur every year and they can refresh themselves and then go back in the field for preaching. They come to Mayapur for the Gaur Purnima festival, and they come here to Mayapur and they get association with all the devotees and they meet everyone and they get good sadhu sangha and a lot of hearing and chanting. And then they go back to their field and then push on the preaching again, like that. So it happened that not just once a year, they would come twice a year. They would come at Kartik also. Now it's coming up to Kartik time, and generally more people would like to come also. The time of Kartik, they would come to the holy place just to be there. And Prabhupada also came himself. And Prabhupada also came. Radha Damodar, he went to Radha Damodar. He gave his Nectar of Devotion classes there at Radha Damodar during the month of Kartik. And he told devotees, come and hear. So Prabhupada was teaching by his example. Prabhupada didn't mind the devotees coming to visit the holy place. He knew it was important for their nourishment, for their spiritual nourishment. But he liked them also to go and preach. Didn't want them to just sit down in the holy place and just chant. He wanted to see them active, doing service. He wanted results. I told you yesterday, right? What did Prabhupada ask Tamal Krishna? Do you remember? I told you yesterday. Prabhupada would come to Tamal Krishna Maharaj and he would ask him, how many devotees have you made?
Yes.
How many books have you distributed? How many properties have you acquired? Prabhupada wanted some results. He expected us, people, and particularly sannyasis, it's their duty to do the propaganda work, to make some propaganda, to go out there and confront Maya. We may say, oh, I'm a sannyasi, I want to be away from Maya. Yeah, but we have to fight the Maya. And we get our protection, we get our armor by following the orders of the spiritual master and by doing proper sadhana, proper devotional activities. It will protect us from the Maya. We're meant to go out into one of the qualities of the sannyas is fearlessness. The sannyasi will go anywhere. He does not think, oh, where is the temple? He will go where there's no temple. He will go to do preaching work, to try to establish the temple. I was going to Thailand and somebody asked me, where's your temple here? I said, we don't have any temple here. They said, why you come here? I said, well, first we have to come here and then later on the temple comes. It's not that we become and automatically temples there waiting for us. We go first. And then you start to do some propaganda work, you start to gather some people, and then you get a place, you get established. Prabhupada went to America with nothing, didn't know people. Now so many big temples are there. All right? So
very good. Thank you, Maharaj. That was very nice answer.
Going ahead. So sometimes in the name of Yukta Vairagya, we say Yukta Vairagya, we have our own material desires, we want these material facilities. No, sometimes for preaching work, Prabhupada liked opulence. You can see like Juhu Temple. Juhu Temple, when they built Juhu Temple, Prabhupada would say, put marble, make everything first class. He wanted it to be very nice because Bombay, Prabhupada would say, the richest people and the most pious people are in Mumbai. So he wanted the Juhu Temple to be very opulent because that's for preaching work. But for our own lifestyle, for our own living, we don't need that opulence. In fact, the opulence is not really good for us. We need simple living. I gave the example of the Goswamis, right? So they gave up everything to take loincloths. So the same way we've come to Krishna consciousness, we're not looking for opulent living standards. We like simple life, simple living. but high thinking. But when it comes to preaching, for the sake of preaching, sometimes we have to use opulence. If you have the program in a nice hall, then people will come. One time in England, we had a program, Prabhupada had come to England, and there was one devotee, his name was Shirodakashayi Vishnu, or I think it was Shirodakashayi Vishnu, yeah. Anyway, he's the one who got that land in Vrindavan. His name before was Gupta, some Gupta. He'd taken initiation with his wife, and they had 3 sons. 3 sons that are still alive, they're devotees, father and mother passed on. Anyway, this Shirodakashayi Vishnu Prabhu, I think, he wanted to install deities in his home. Before he went to India, he wanted his deities installed in his home. So he arranged a program. He said, Prabhupada, I'll arrange a Bhagavad Sapta for you. And he arranged it in a place called Southall, which is a suburb of England, a suburb of London. And there's a lot of Indian there. But when they had the program, Prabhupada came the first night, he saw the hall, and he said, I'm not going back there again. He said, he turned to his sannyasi disciple and he told Raman Swami, he said, you go tomorrow night. He said, I'm not going again. He said, that hall was terrible. So Prabhupada liked a nice hall. Generally, we would rent big, majestic halls, a town hall for him. We had different town halls around London. And Prabhupada would come and give lectures, very nice. And he would be happy, he liked it. But that particular hall in Southall, oh, Prabhupada said, that was hell. So he told everybody, Swami, you go. So for preaching, sometimes opulence is good because it attracts more people. You have a nice hall, you have a nice temple, it can attract people. But for us, for our own selves, we don't need it. We don't need the opulence. We can live very simply. We have to be a little careful about that, though. Sometimes yukta vairagya, I said, it can become falgu vairagya. So use the opulence for preaching, not for our own eating and sleeping. We should have, Rupa Goswami mentions also, jnana vairagya, jnana karma janavritam. So jnana, the jnanis, they all desire liberation, but the devotees not thinking about liberation. Devotees know we're already liberated, we're already on the liberated platform. We've begun our devotional service. We know we're spirit souls, we're Brahmabhuta. We're on that platform of transcendence. We need to keep ourselves engaged in on that platform. And the best engagement is Sankirtan. Lord Chaitanya's movement is based on Sankirtan. If we do a lot of Sankirtan, very powerful, very purifying for us. It's very nice for us to go out on Sankirtan. And Prabhupada liked very much to see the devotees, and especially the senior devotees, if they would all go out on Sankirtan. When the senior devotees go out, it's very inspiring to the junior devotees. They need to see that example. Example speaks louder than words. We can preach about Sankirtan, but if we don't do it, then what is the good? We have to show the example. We have to be willing to go out there. We have to we have to have nice Sankirtan programs, make them attractive. Some different places in the world I go, it's very impressive to see their Sankirtan. One place where they have wonderful Sankirtan is up in Russia, in the city of Vladivostok. Now, Vladivostok, Russia, very cold. It's a coastal town, very cold winds and a lot of snow and ice also, long winter. But every day, devotees will arrange to do Sankirtan, even in the winter, even in that cold, at least 1 hour a day they have to go. And they go right out there, and people see them every day. Wow, they're just amazed. It's such a wonderful example for other people to see these people, how they're dedicated. They go out and they organize the dancing, and they have these ladies dancing, and they have men also dressed up. And they do it very nicely. Very wonderful Sankirtan. So Sankirtan is a very important part of our movement. I know in England also, George Harrison purchased the Bhaktivedanta Manor, and really the inspiration behind him purchasing the Bhaktivedanta Manor was that he would see our devotees every day go out on the street in London. They go on that main street called Oxford Street, and every day, summer and winter, hail, rain and snow, they would be out there and they would be chanting. And he was just so impressed that he decided he wanted to really help the devotees. And this was at a time when we had nothing. We were renting a little place there in central London, Bury Place. We were having so many problems, it's so crowded. And then George bought the Bhaktivedanta Manor. Inspiration, Sankirtan. So Sankirtan is very important, very powerful, very purifying. We really want to encourage everyone to try to get out there on Sankirtan and do it. What we don't want to do is just get attached to material facilities. We know what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati thought when they got the Bagbazar temple donated to the Gaudiya Math, and he heard all his devotees fighting with each other about what room they should get. So he said, better to sell the marble and print books. He said, there will be fire in this ashram. He didn't want that kind of thing, that kind of mood. That is not the devotional mood. But it's difficult, you know, you get an office, you get some facility, you're given some position. It's very easy to get comfortable. We don't want to go out, we don't want to leave. We have to show that example. We want to be careful about speculative and fruitive activities and jnana karma janavritam. We should be very careful to avoid we don't want to cultivate speculative knowledge like reading books about the Brahman. Certainly we don't worship the Brahman, neither do we have to know a lot about the Brahman. You don't need to glorify it. Lord Chaitanya came and beat up Advaita because he was reading that book about which glorified impersonal liberation, Yoga Vashishta, right? Lord Chaitanya came all the way from Mayapur to Shantipur, beat Advaita because he was promoting the Yoga Vashishta and mood of impersonalism. So as devotees, we also have to be very careful we don't ever get involved that way. We need to also be careful that while we do need knowledge, we also need service. And we shouldn't think that just having knowledge is everything. Devotional service itself is also very, very powerful. We said that is Krishna's Swarup Shakti, Krishna's internal potency. But to just sit and study, just become a bookworm, that is not desirable. That will simply, Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, that will cause us to have more doubts. Because we'll read so many different things, different books. One book says this, another book says another thing. We'll end up simply confused. We have to be very careful not to get too much entangled in simply reading books. But we do need knowledge. But don't just think Don't just become a bookworm, and don't avoid service. If there's going to be Harinam, join the Harinam. Go out on Sankirtan. Don't try to deviate from doing some service. And Prabhupada even liked sannyasis to cook. He would send them in the kitchen to cook. Different sannyasis. Satsvarupa Maharaj was cooking for Prabhupada. I saw Riparinandan Swami cook for Prabhupada. And it's not that because we're sannyasis we cannot cook. No, we cook for Krishna. So important for us not to become too proud. Don't become thinking, I'm a big scholar, I just read books, I'm a sannyasi, I just need knowledge. Lord Chaitanya heard, of course, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was telling Lord Chaitanya, I will teach you Vedanta, the knowledge will protect you, make you a good sannyasi. But of course, we may end up just knowing so many things, we just become proud. So actually it's mentioned in the Adi Lila, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, chapter 16, verse 11, Prabhupada said, reading books, many books will lead to doubts. So we have to be very careful. We have to read Prabhupada's books. That's very important. We want to encourage the reading of Prabhupada's books. Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nectar of Devotion. These books, this is what should be studied. These books, we don't need to read so many other books, but we do need to read Prabhupada's books very carefully. Prabhupada said, everything is in my books. You just have to read them. So we need to show the example. It's very nice to see now there's so many reading clubs, devotees organizing themselves in different groups, sometimes on the internet. They have reading clubs together. They read different slokas. They read through the books together. They take turns to read. But then Prabhupada also says, more important than reading is discussing and explaining. So that is the real business of sannyasis, that we want to discuss and explain the contents of Srila Prabhupada's books. We want to encourage the reading and at the same time discuss also. Prabhupada would sit in his garden there in Los Angeles and read Krishna book. Devotees would come and they would sit and read, and Prabhupada would be so happy. Everybody's sitting there reading. I was just hearing just yesterday or the day before, this is one devotee who made the Madanga drum. What was his name?
Ishan?
Ishan, right. Thank you, Prabhu. Ishan, right. Ishan Das Prabhu was on the, he was telling how one evening he was laying down in the ashram in Los Angeles, and he was laying on his chest with reading the book, reading one of Prabhupada's books. And Prabhupada came in. Somehow Prabhupada came in where he was laying down, and he saw him laying down on the floor. And he looked over to see what he was reading, and he saw he was reading Krishna book. And Prabhupada was so pleased. Prabhupada said, oh, thank you very much. You're reading my book. Ishan was saying how much Prabhupada appreciated the fact that he was reading. So very important for us. You should always think any moment Prabhupada's going to come and look, see what we're doing. What are we reading? We do want to promote reading Prabhupada's books. So in devotional service, this is very important for us. We want knowledge, but you can get all the knowledge we need from Prabhupada's books. Now, what about some things like rituals and homas? As devotees, can we attend these kind of things? Can we take part in these functions? What do you say? Anybody? Do you go to rituals? If there's a funeral in your family, are you going to go? There was a case, Swarup Damodar Prabhu, before he took sannyas, his father passed away in Manipur, and they got a telegram from India saying your father passed away. So he was saying, I should go back and do the last rites. But Prabhupada told him, you don't need to do that. He said, you're free, you're finished with all that. You don't need to do that. So Swarup Damodar did what Prabhupada said. He didn't go. But you can go if it's not too inconvenient, and if it's going to create a lot of trouble, family members may criticize you and so on like that. Although that's not a very big issue. Just because family members may criticize you doesn't matter very much. We have to, yes?
In Alachua, actually, we just did a few ceremonies. One of your god sister just recently passed away, Mother Patharajani. And all her family, friends, mother, sister, brother-in-law, they're all karmis, they're not devotees. But they came to the temple and they heard our chanting, they got prasadam. And it's very actually beneficial, I see. We did last few years, we did few of a lot of Prabhupada's disciples, few passed away. And we invite them and we actually hold the final ceremony, funeral ceremony.
Okay.
And they hear, they take prasadam and they appreciate. And they really see the quality of their sister or brother who passed away. They didn't know that such a high caliber as a devotee.
Okay. And we know Lord Chaitanya also, he went to Gaya to do the Shrad for his father. Of course, externally, the reason was like that, but internally, he wanted to go to get his initiation from Ishwarapuri. But, you know, Lord Chaitanya could do it. Why can't you also? If you have to. But sannyasis, generally, we don't have to worry so much. What about astrology? What is the mood about astrology? Is this compatible with pure devotional service? Some comments? Anybody else who hasn't spoken today? Ekalavya Prabhu's there?
Yeah, I'm here, Maharaj.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What do you think about astrology?
I think there's no point. It's going to happen. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen.
Yeah, we have to consider what's more powerful, destiny or Krishna.
Krishna is more powerful.
Yeah. But astrology sometimes can be helpful. For some people, not so much, maybe for sannyasis, someone who's already sannyasi, you're not going to bother about astrology, but ordinary people, young children and so on, helps us to understand more their nature, what things will be more suitable for them. We can get a lot of guidance from it by seeing their charts. Marriages, sometimes it can be much easier, although it's not 100%, not 100% at all. We had one case recently in China, actually. There was a couple, they were very well matched, almost 100%, perfect match, and still ended up in divorce. I don't know. So astrology is not 100%, but it can give some guidance, it can help. And I remember even when Prabhupada was sick in Vrindavan, Prabhupada would have, he'd send people go and see the astrologers. What did the astrologers say? And Prabhupada was interested to know a little interest.
I have a question, Maharaj, on that.
Yeah.
Recently, we had Jayapataka Maharaj's 50th year celebration of his sannyas. And one of the speaker was from Madhya Sampradaya. And there was a description given that how astrologer actually predicted that he will maintain his sannyas status. So it seems like it is in the Vaishnava tradition. And but I'm not saying that we should do it, but before taking sannyas, I'm not saying after sannyas, but before sannyas, maybe it's not a bad idea to have a some kind of a forecast to see that he will be steady in this path.
Yes, I think so. I agree with that. I think before going into sannyasa. It's something people may like to just check out, make sure that there's nothing too much against them proceeding. But as we say, astrology is not 100%, and definitely not in this age, in this Kali Yuga. To get an accurate astrology prediction is very difficult, very rare, but may happen. So, the idea is we want everything which we do, whether it's astrology or rituals or maybe yoga, maybe you do yoga asanas. These things should all be in order to facilitate and enhance our devotional service, particularly our mood of hearing and chanting.
Yes.
Does everyone agree with that?
Yes.
Yes, Maharaj.
And any comments from anyone about these kind of things? Yeah, I feel, you know.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. It's
Yes,
Madan
Hare
Mohandas
Krishna.
here. Madan Mohandas here. Thank you so much for your deep and Prabhupada-centered presentation today. Thank you so much for that. And I wanted to share with you, with all of you, a very brief story about sannyas and astrology, if I could.
Yeah, can you just speak up a bit?
Yeah, I'm trying to. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, okay.
It's an actual story of a sannyas candidate in the Gaudiya Math. He was an aspiring sannyasi, and Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj wanted to give him sannyas, but before giving him sannyas, he had his chart read by a reputed astrologer. And the astrologer came back and said, well, if I know anything about astrology, this devotee won't be able to maintain his sannyas if he takes it. He will get married. And if he doesn't get married, I'll stop my practice altogether. That means I don't know anything about astrology. So Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj became upset. And he said, is there any remedy? Because the devotee is very nice and he does believe in bhakti being superior to all karmic considerations. So the astrologer said, yes, actually we could have a yagya, and that yagya is very costly and costs about 1 lakh. And that yagya might help him overcome these karmic tendencies. And Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj had just received a donation of 100,000 rupees. It was in his drawer in the desk. And he said, okay, here's the money, incidentally. So he took out the money and gave it to astrologer, and astrologer was just reaching out to the money, and he said, well, actually, there's a better remedy. If that devotee chants 1 lakh of holy names every day, that will overcome his karma much better. So the astrologer himself refused to take the money and told him, well, he should chant Hare Krishna, chant the holy name. And the devotee followed the advice, and from what I know, he's still a sannyasi in the Gaudiya Math. So that's an example of how bhakti is superior to karma, even in such considerations.
Very good,
and,
thank you. Very nice.
And also, from what I heard from Badrinarayan Maharaj, when Prabhupada had his chart read in Vrindavan in the last days, he would sometimes send a devotee to have his chart read by another famous and reliable astrologer, and he would say, okay, let's hear what they say, let's have a laugh.
Yeah.
That was his comment from what I remember.
Right. Yeah.
And Badrinarayan Maharaj also said that astrology kills, quoting Prabhupada, he said, according to Badrinarayan Maharaj, who is a very reliable source of Prabhupada-isms, he said that astrology kills the childlike innocence of bhakti. That was his quote. I'll end here. Thank you so much, Maharaj, for this wonderful presentation.
Okay, thank you. Interesting points. Astrology kills the childlike
innocence. Childlike innocence of bhakti.
Like innocence of bhakti. A nice quote. Very good. So thank you so much. Any other points here? Okay, so maybe we'll finish here today. Prabhu, anybody in charge here?
I was just thinking to whether I should tell the story or not, but it may take a few minutes, maybe later. Because this is a true story, Maharaj, in Mayapur. When I was general manager there, I won't say the name, but one of the sannyasi in ISKCON asked me to take him to an astrologer. And there was a famous astrologer who actually saw Prabhupada's hand. But without further ado, I went there, and the astrologer, I still remember, he didn't even look at the chart. Just by seeing the forehead, he said something, and the devotee is still alive. He said, I see a woman in your life. How can you be a sannyasi? So he asked me, should I tell him or you should tell him? I said, no, you speak English, you can tell him. So he told him, and after actually 6 months, he disappeared, and then now he's back again. So it's very interesting that how some astrologer, actually they can see very clearly. And of course, the sannyasi fell down, but he's dedicated, he's still serving. So very nice.
Okay. Yep, Prabhupada understood that many of these young men taking sannyas, it was going to be very difficult for them to maintain it. He told them, he would say, most of you are not suited for this. But Prabhupada, what can I do? I've declared war on Maya. I've declared war on the material energy. So giving them all, in times of war, you have to do these kind of things. So give people the chance. So even though difficult for them, several of them did very wonderful service, very, very wonderful services. Although they may not have maintained their sannyas, they did still make major contributions to the development of the Krishna consciousness movement.
Yes, Maharaj.
And I feel greatly indebted to a lot of them for the service which they did do. But Prabhupada liked that people take sannyas, they should be serious about it, that this is a lifetime commitment, that there's no going back. It's not like in Buddhism. You become a Buddhist monk and then you can give it up. There's a ceremony to go in, a ceremony to go out. That's not a big problem, to be a Buddhist monk and then give up being a Buddhist monk. Not a big thing, happens all the time. But when we renounce the world, then we want to keep that view of renunciation. We don't want to give up that renunciation. It's a lifetime commitment. Of course, we make that commitment when we take our initiation with Diksha. From the time of Diksha, lifetime commitment is there. Serious devotee. They're committed for life that we have to do this. No question of compromising. Okay,
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much.
So I think that we can stop now.
Yes, Maharaj, no problem. Thank you so much for your enlightening lecture, Maharaj.
Okay, Prabhu, thank you very much.
So
Tomorrow?
we will be having the next section at in 1 hour from now. It's exactly 50 minutes from now.
And tomorrow?
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
So, the classes for tomorrow will be coordinated with Dharmatma Prabhu with you, Maharaj.
Okay, Prabhu, thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna, Dandavat, Maharaj.